This is a pleasure to bring him on the program here tonight. An award-winning journalist from the New York Post who covers, among other things, the Olympics and the world of boxing. We've got him on here tonight to talk about the college terrain that he covers, both football and basketball. We've had on a couple of different employees from News Corp previously on the program here. Liz Clayman, I think she's going to be back on our next episode on the 28th from Fox Business, and also Eric Bowling and Ellis Hennigan from the TV side. And speaking of Ellis, we've had on a couple people from Newsday, Ellis and Ken Davidoff and Neil Best, but I think this is the first time we've gotten on anybody from the Post, and we definitely needed to do that because they're a very important paper, very influential in media circles here. This gentleman, you've been able to see him from time to time on national television, whether it be the ESPN family of networks or other places. But again, as I say, an award-winning journalist. I was excited when I heard we were going to be bringing him on, and I'm glad to be able to bring him on at this time. Lenn Robbins from the New York Post. Lenn, it's a pleasure to have you on the FDH Lounge tonight, sir. How are you tonight?
I'm great, and the pleasure's mine. Thanks so much. That was such a gracious opening.
Oh, thank you. It's good to have you here. We love to be able to talk any number of different subjects with people. It's very intriguing to have you on here tonight at really kind of an intersection time of the year between your collegiate beats here. Let's start on the world of football, and I noted from some of your writing in recent days here, and it is a little bit of a coincidence, the last two Heisman Trophy winners now, with Cam Newton and Mark Ingram, both of them having parental issues on the father's side, as is the case with too many young players these days, I guess, but very high-profile issues in their case. If Cam Newton were to come back to school next year, which really none of us thinks is going to happen, I think another thing that they would have in common would be a very disappointing Heisman runner-up here. Mark Ingram not even among the finalists here. There's something about winning the Heisman the first time that just tends to set the bar at, I guess, an unrealistic level. Outside of Tim Tebow, who was in a pretty close one a couple of years back here, I mean, nobody, Len, seems to even come close the next time around here, even when the field appears to be pretty clear for them at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Obviously only one player has done that, and that's Archie Griffin. And think about it, when he did that, you don't have 1/10 of the media exposure, media outlets that you have today. There is so much pressure. There's so much expectation that goes into, winning a Heisman Trophy and then coming back and winning a second. I'm not saying that it won't ever be done. I think there will be, some special player who comes along and will do it. But, the test of time has shown that it's going to be very, very difficult to do.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be a fascinating spectacle as the national championship game approaches now. And as was a point that was made on TV in recent days here as well, that this is another dynamic that has played out a number of times in recent years. And I guess not completely surprising because it might be a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing here as far as how guys get to the Heisman level. But if you're perceived as disproportionately having contributed to team success, you're likely to be there. We have a couple of guys this year, whether it be, of course, the winner in Cam Newton or LaMichael James, they're going to be squaring off in the national championship game. And many times it's been a runner-up on that stage who's gotten the better of the Heisman winner, not least of which because outside of Mark Ingram last year, and it's not even that his game necessarily was one for the ages, but they haven't been able to have those dominant type of games on the in the big game that they've had the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I kind of credit Vince Young with the guy who's set the bar in terms of the runner-up getting revenge. If you recall the year that Reggie Bush won it over Vince Young, I'd never seen a more disappointed athlete, at a Heisman Trophy ceremony. And Vince was very clear about it. He said, I'm going to get my revenge in the national championship game. And, boy, did he ever scoring, with just seconds left, the winning touchdown and what most people thought was, a monumental upset. Look, I don't think the Heisman Trophy has any bearing on what happens in a bowl game, what happens down the road in terms of a professional career. I mean, we've seen Andre Ware and Eric Crouch, and the list goes on and on. I think that people have to remember it's just an acknowledgement for being the best player, and let's be honest, really the best offensive player in college football this year.
That's true, and it really is a measure of that and the perception of that, nothing more, nothing less, and that's really a good point. You, of course, wrote of this not long after the matchup was set here about the fireworks, of course, that are going to be evident in this national championship game. And from a standpoint of just pure excitement, fast break up and down the field, this is one of the most intriguing games probably of the last decade. Plus, the conventional wisdom in a lot of quarters when you look at this, when you look at the rougher terrain that Auburn went over to get to this point, the fact that they seem to be peaking later in the year as opposed to what Oregon was doing maybe back around October. There are a lot of folks, and I suppose I would include myself in that would lean towards Auburn based on those factors. How are you seeing the game at this early date shaping up?
Well, I think it is going to be a great game, and I think that a lot of points are going to be scored. Now, having said that, I don't think the defenses are going to be as bad as people are, predicting them to be and making them out to be. I think that we have some just remarkably talented offensive players and offensive schemes. I, too, believe that Auburn has an edge of this game, as you mentioned, because of the level of competition that they've played and because of the team speed that they have. I think they have more team speed across the board than Oregon. The one thing that has to make you leery about going with Auburn is there's not any team in the country that is more one-player dependent than Auburn. I mean, Cam Newton, I don't know what the exact, if he's not 65 to 70 to 80% of their offense, I don't know what he is. Now, you could say, well, what if Darren Thomas, the quarterback for Oregon, gets hurt? Of course it's going to make a difference. Of course, if they lost LaMichael James, it would make a difference. But no player going out would have the impact that Cam Newton would. And, it's interesting we're talking about this, the week that Brett Favre doesn't play for the first time since 1492. All it takes is it can be one quirky thing. It doesn't have to be that big blow. I mean, look at the national championship game, a year ago. I mean, one seemingly benign hit on Colt McCoy knocks him out for an entire game.
Yeah, and it really, you could just feel the entire audience, I think, deflating at that point in time. Maybe not so much if you were an Alabama fan, but again, that was not what anybody really wanted to see. I think as far as it really did seem to turn into a foregone conclusion at a very early point. You wrote a column several weeks back on the tough road to respectability for Brian Kelly in Notre Dame this year. Maybe the honeymoon ended a little earlier than some people might have thought when he was this big glistening hire last year. Very interesting, too, that we were trying to implement the 3-4, which is something we've talked about on this show previously. We've been kind of intrigued by that because you don't generally see it in college football, and no doubt there's an adjustment period for him there, getting the right players in place defensively. But having said that, they rally late in the year to make a bowl game, and I'm just really struck by this, Len, that CBS hitting the lottery, as it were. You've got the Sun Bowl getting played on what's a legal holiday this year, December 31st. A lot of folks off from work when they wouldn't normally be because New Year's Day is a Saturday. And then to get the old Catholics versus convicts thing going again, I mean, that's just unbelievable given what they generally get for the Sun Bowl.
Yeah, kudos to the Sun Bowl people for managing to pull that one off. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that, this is a very, very disappointing Miami team that's just went through a coaching change. It doesn't matter that this is a Notre Dame team that, disappointed a lot of people. It's the brand, and that's what separates, to me, college football from pro football and other things. It's the institution. It's not the individual. I think that Brian Kelly, without a doubt, is the right guy for Notre Dame at the right time. I think he is going to get it done there. I think he is going to get it turned around. Look, did they take some hits this year? Absolutely. Do I think they took more hits than I expected? Yeah, I do. Having said that, when you have a slight margin for error like they did, and, you lose your best offensive player and your tight end, Kyle Rudolph, and then you lose your starting quarterback, some people say, that's just an excuse. Maybe it is, but there's also reality in there, too.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of bowls, there was a little bit of supposition on the show last week when we were breaking this down, we did a little bit of a projection as to what, if they went to a +1, what that would look like this year. And full disclosure, I'm actually a big mark for the +1. I'm not a big playoff guy because I do believe in the sanctity of the regular season. But the thing that just jumps off the page at me with the conference tie-ins, Len, is that if you did something like that, as much as Jerry Jones is angling to get the Cotton Bowl in there and having it at Jerry World right now, it seems hard to believe you could have a +1 without the Cotton Bowl, because in all likelihood you'd have Ohio State and Arkansas on the outside looking in, UConn snarfing up one of those automatic bids in something that I think a lot of people would find unjustifiable based on the weakness of the Big East here. So it seems to me if that was the intermediate step in the next contract starting in 2015, if it would be a +1, you couldn't do it with just the present assortment of bowls, could you?
I don't know. You probably could. I think you'd have to definitely do some tweaking to the BCS structure. You just hit on Connecticut, and, this is not an anti-Big East or anti-Connecticut. This is an anti-policy in place. I think they would have to change it so that when you have a year like this where a conference champion can barely crack the top 25, wins its league with 3 losses, you have to say that they relinquish their right to get to a BCS bowl game. I mean, it's definitely a place where, a Michigan State should be, or, one of those other one-loss teams should be. And I think if you did it that way, you'd have a really, really strong pool, to draw from. I mean, obviously, I would think of Boise State is certainly more worthwhile than Connecticut.
Oh, definitely. And we were talking about this last week as well. I mean, if somebody would have told you the week after Vatech dumped against James Madison that one of the 2 teams from the Vatech-Boise game would be in the BCS, I don't think any of us would have believed it would have been Frank Beamer's squad.
Well, I had Boise as my number 1 from the get-go. I thought that they were going to go undefeated. It just shows you, how narrow the margin of error is. A field goal kicker misses 2 from inside the 30. But, that is one of the untold stories or underreported stories, I think, of this season. What Frank Beamer was able to do with that team. I was just doing some homework last night. The Virginia Tech's the best team in the country in turnover margin. And to be honest with you, and I think of Virginia Tech, I think of a somewhat undisciplined team. They're running around all over the field, mayhem, Beamer ball, et cetera. It's fundamentally it's a better team than at least I was giving them credit for. Look, I'm sorry, I don't care what level you play at. To start 0-2 like that and to come back and win your conference and to beat a Florida State team that was playing very well, very high off the win over Florida, and just bury them in the ACC title game. Boy, Frank Beamer deserves, certainly some Coach of the Year. Look, I mean, obviously Chip Kelly's done a wonderful job, and so has Gene Chizik, and so has Gary Patterson.
Well, not only that, you look at how disappointing and underachieving relative to reasonable expectations I think the ACC has been since the expansion back around 2004 there. I think a lot of us figured they'd be better than they were, and yet you look at it, and they've just been kind of beating each other up in one kind of mediocre, heap there. Vatech's had some pretty good teams, but not seriously contended for a national championship. I'm not 100% sure, I think they're the first team to run the table in conference since the expansion. I mean, it's startling to think this might be the best team of the ACC expansion era.
Yeah, I do think that Florida State is poised to return to being a dominant team. I thought if Miami would have had a little bit more patience with Randy Shannon, that could have happened down there. But one of the things, if you take a look throughout the ACC, you've got a lot of programs where there's been a lot of coaching turmoil. Whenever you don't have continuity, you're always asking for some sort of trouble. So I think that you need to be able to get the right coach. You need to be able to keep them in place. Tradition certainly helps in college football. We all know that Florida State has that. I would think now, if they're committed to Jimbo Fisher and they let him do his work, I think that's going to be a program to be reckoned with in the years to come.
Well, it certainly looks like in year one that they're on the right path as far as how that went with the whole gamble of turning to him and booting out Bobby Bowden in the fashion that they did. It looks like it's paying off, at least in the near term, or poised to. College hoops, of course, another very prominent beat for you, Len. And just in looking at this, I'm curious to know what are some of the big early season stories to you. I am probably more shocked by the quick rise of UConn than anything else. I think I'm like a lot of people who thought they had a chance to be pretty good, but number 4 in a lot of the polls right now, didn't really see that coming. Is UConn the big early story, or is there something else in your mind?
Well, I think there are two of them. I think there's a good news and a bad news story. And I think the good news story clearly is UConn. And, the emergence of Kemba Walker as, without question right now, the player of the year in college basketball. Inch for inch, pound for pound, fast muscle twitch for fast muscle twitch. That guy's as good as it gets. He's also a great kid, and he plays with a smile on his face. And, you got to love that. The other story to me is the fall thus far of Michigan State. I thought Michigan State was clearly the second-best team in the country. It's not just that they've lost to the likes of Connecticut or Duke or Syracuse, for that matter, because those are 3 good teams. But, the loss to Syracuse, they just did not play like Michigan State. They were not aggressive. They did not attack the boards. In the final 8 to 10 minutes or so, they almost played like a team that didn't really believe in itself to come back anymore. And that is very, very un-Michigan State-like. Now, having said that, they have also traveled about 16,000 miles. They've played a very tough schedule. They've got a number of kids with injuries. And I still think they have, one of the 5 best coaches in college basketball in Tom Izzo. So I think they will be back this season. I think they'll be a force to reckon with come March. But right now, UConn's the feel-good story, and Michigan State's the feel-bad story.
Yeah, you guys, breaking news here into the show. It's interesting that Len brought up Michigan State, because that their struggles, early season struggles too, have caught me by surprise. But one of their tougher than expected wins kind of gets a reprieve. Breaking news here: the Oakland Golden Grizzlies, who just took them down to the wire over the weekend, beat Tennessee tonight by 7,
Whoa.
handing Tennessee their first loss. The Oakland Golden, the first, we talk about the hipster teams. I think they're going to lead the hipster brigade there, Ricky. Oakland, a top mid-major to look at out of the Summit League, beating Tennessee, handing Bruce Pearl and company their first loss.
Did Bruce Pearl's suspension start early, Kyle? That's a shocker. Now that right there has got to be that neck and neck with Michigan State on the big disappointments. No, Len?
It's interesting. I was talking to Tom Izzo after the loss to Syracuse, and he said, you know what, guys, we got a tough game in Oakland. A couple of us, okay, come on, Tom, pull the other leg, he plays Jingle Bells. He's like, no, we got a tough game against them. Hey, isn't that what the beauty of March Madness is all about, right, is that this will be a story for tomorrow, and it will be a great story. But can you imagine if this happened in March? Now that's a story.
That would be truly amazing. Speaking of March, this is going to be the first year under the newly reconstituted format here, with Time Warner getting involved here with the different networks, TBS and some of the other ones joining the TV parade at going to 68 from 65 as far as the tournament, and yet they had been threatening last year to make it 96 teams in there, and I have the very cynical point of view, Len, that they floated that out there. It got massive outrage, and I had the sense it was a deliberate trial balloon, so that when you go from 65 to 68, everybody says, "Oh, thank God, it's not a massive change here." Did you have any similar cynical thoughts about that when the ultimate parameters came down?
Oh, wow, you're a grassy knoll guy, huh? You're a conspiracy guy, huh? I like that. I didn't look at it quite like that. I was surprised because I think that there was a tremendous amount of money to be gained if they had gone to an even bigger format. Now, having said that, nobody ever explained to me why they felt the need to even fix something that, forget, wasn't broken. It was brilliant. To me, it's the best sporting event of the year. So, if they were thinking, let's like negotiations, right? I want 7 years at, $10 million, and what's the real number? I wouldn't put it past anyone. These are great business people, but to me, at the end of the day, the only argument that I heard that got me to sway a little into expanding the field, Jimmy Boeheim was just saying, look, we talk about it being a game for the kids. Why not have more kids involved in the tournament? And I didn't have an answer for that.
Well, I mean, that's a nice kind of convenient, Maud Flanders, won't someone please think of the children type of rationale. But, that's, I don't know. That's a little saccharine for my taste as far as that being an explanation. That's just me personally editorializing, Len. But as I look at it, it seems to me that in terms of business, you always walk a fine line on these things, right? Because you want to expand the pie where you can, and you don't want to kill off some of the money that's already coming in. You would take the conference tournaments and take them. A lot of them are borderline worthless right now in the bigger tournaments for dispensing seeds. I don't